I'm really excited to present this interview to you today with Dr. Geoff Tabin, and I want to make a couple of preparatory remarks before we get into the interview. Right now in the world, there's so much drama, especially if you look at the news or newspapers or radio or TV media, what have you. There's so many horrible things going on in the world that it can almost get you kind of depressed, down, or kind of make you feel numb. And I felt it was really important, critically important, to try to look at a side of humanity that actually is inspiring, something that can make you feel uplifted, something that can make you believe in humanity again. And I believe this interview is exactly that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to recommend that you share this with your patients. Let them look at it. They need some inspiration too, and see what people are doing out in the real world and dramatically and directly and deliberately affecting people's lives in a profound way. So I want to first just kind of give you a little bit of background here and say, well, let me start with thank you, Geoff, for taking the time to sit with me here today.
Thank you for having me, Pat.
So I've known Dr. Geoff Tabin. I met him through Paul Zane Pilzer some years ago. We're out in Utah right now, but up in Park City, Utah. And Geoff is really a rock star celebrity in his realm. And when I started hearing more and more about your work and the things that you're doing, I got more and more interested. And it turns out that a book was written about this. It's an extremely well-written book that was very inspiring for me to read. And I wanted to share it with the audience, and I couldn't be more excited to have you sitting here. So let's start out, just with your journey. You went to undergrad where?
At Yale.
At Yale, and you were pre-med there.
I was pre-med, and I did a lot of sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fairly focused on, I played, college tennis. I rock climbed fanatically.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to go into orthopedic surgery,
Yep.
complementary to chiropractic work.
Yes.
And sports injuries were kind of my interest while I was in college.
Now, when you say you got into rock climbing, let's just talk about that part of your life, because that in and of itself is you have extraordinary achievement there. So you've climbed Everest. Were you like in line as far as what year was that, and how many Americans?
In 1983, we did the first ascent of the east face of Mount Everest,
Right.
which is a new route that actually has not been repeated.
You mean the first ever?
The first ever.
Wow.
And it's the only route that's been opened on Mount Everest with no native support whatsoever.
Wow.
And then I went to the summit on a second successful trip in 1988 with the first 2 American women to climb Mount Everest. I was the token boy who got to the top.
Wow.
With the first 2 American women. I was the team doctor on that trip.
Wow. And that's going to tie back into our story here.
But back in my college days, I was really more focused on technical rock climbing, big wall climbs on El Capitan.
Yeah.
I used to climb at the Shawangunk Cliffs outside of New Paltz, New York,
Yeah.
and sort of throughout the American rock climbing scene. And the thing that really kind of changed my life is I had a scholarship to go to Oxford University for 2 years after college. I'd already been accepted to medical school. I deferred for 2 years. And I came to Oxford and studied philosophy. And I began looking at the moral imperative of giving health care and having a healthy life for everybody on the planet. And I also looked at comparative economic systems of healthcare delivery. And I really saw the disparity between the poor places on our planet and those of us lucky enough to have won the birth lottery and be born in a place like America or Europe or Australia.
Right.
So by the time I finished at Oxford and I matriculated at Harvard Medical School, I already had changed my focus to want to do something in global health. And climbing also allowed me, Oxford had some indigenous trust funds that were remnants of the days when Oxford students were supposed to civilize various aspects of the world, that funded some travel abroad to climb. And so I also began to actually experience what healthcare was like in some of the poorer places. And I really was sort of looking for how to get involved in international health. I went and worked as a general doctor in Nepal. Most of the problems I was facing, Patrick, were actually public health issues, things that an individual doctor could not significantly impact. Problems with clean water, vaccinations, basic hygiene. But the one crazy miracle that I saw was in eye care.
Yeah.
I watched a Dutch team come in, do cataract surgery. In the village where I was living, it was just accepted that you get old, your hair turns white, your eye turns white, and then you die.
Right.
And that's what a mature cataract looks like. We never see them in America. Here in the States, we have one ophthalmologist for every 18,000 people.
Right.
And here at the University of Utah, I'm faculty at the University of Utah now, when somebody's having a little trouble driving in the rain at night, they say, what's wrong? My right eye is a little blurry. Oh, you got an early cataract. Well, let's fix it.
Right.
But worldwide, there are 20 million people who can't see the shadow of a hand move in front of their face because of an absolute cataract.
20 million.
20 million that could be easily treated. Actually, 90% of the blindness on our planet is in the developing world, and 85% of that blindness could have been prevented or could still be treated.
Wow. Now, does the altitude have something to do with why cataracts form there, or
a little bit.
sun?
It's really multifactorial. It's partially the intense UV light causes oxidative damage to the crystalline proteins in the lens of the eye. A second is a lack of antioxidants in the diet. A third, people tend to get more mature cataracts earlier when they're subjected to the intense fluid shifts of chronic dysentery and diarrhea as a child. And then there's a bit of a genetic aspect.
Right.
So that people who look like you and I, our biggest risk is later in life we develop macular degeneration. The lens of the eye actually can become opaque and shield the retina from some of the intense light.
Right, got it. So, Harvard Medical School, you get out, you go, you then did some general work, and then when did you decide ophthalmology was it?
When I watched this Dutch team performing cataract surgery in Nepal, and in subsistence agrarian economy, having a person who can't contribute really takes so much out of the society. People get depressed, they wait to die. Another name for a blind person in Nepal is a mouth with no hands, which is a huge burden to the family. And I saw this incredible miracle of cataract surgery, and I found out that no one in the country of Nepal at that time, this is now in the late 1980s, was doing modern cataract surgery with lens implants in Nepal. And I got very excited. I came back. I trained as an ophthalmologist, first at Brown University, and then I did my fellowship in Australia at the University of Melbourne.
Wow.
Where there was one of the few areas where people were saying we need to teach and empower local people was in Australia, and a sort of crazy curmudgeonly professor in Australia named Fred Hollows.
Right.
And what I didn't know when I was in Nepal looking to see who was doing cataract surgery was that Sandak Ruit, who's been my partner, my elder brother, is really the genius behind anything I've been lucky enough to accomplish, was already at that time living in Australia retraining under Fred Hollows. And I can safely say that if anywhere I've been, any place I've been, the smartest person I've ever encountered, depending on how you define intelligence, I think he'll fit into any one of those categories. The most brilliant man I've ever met is my partner and elder brother, Sandak Ruit.
So here's what's interesting, I know, and we're going to go somewhere with this, and I think the wider implications of it. You saw a need in the world. You obviously have a Ivy League undergrad and postgrad education. You had the I won't say luxury, but the opportunity to study philosophy, at Oxford. You see this go on, and then happenstance that you go to Australia, you meet the one guy, and you also meet Sandak Ruit, who happens to be from Nepal, and who has a desire to help these people because as you said, blindness is almost a death sentence. You can't really function, you become a burden on your family, et cetera, et cetera. And it's something that it's curable, fairly simply. But one of the issues I remember is that the cost for a cataract or for a lens and to do the cataract surgery was kind of out of reach to be able to do charitable work for the volumes of people who needed it. So wasn't it the Australian doctor who said, what was that meeting? I mean, I remember you the story about the meeting.
Well, I was in my second year of residency, and I was at a meeting talking about cataract blindness in the world. It was chaired by the person who was then the head of the National Eye Institute, and he was president of the American Academy of Ophthalmology, and everybody was, they're very well-heeled, well-dressed, and everyone was talking about how can we reach this huge number of blind, and in those days, we had these glasses that are kind of like Coke bottle thick glasses.
Right.
It cause a lot of distortion when you take the whole lens out of the eye.
Right.
And you could do that relatively inexpensively,
Mhm.
but it didn't restore very good vision.
Right.
And they were talking about how do we do that for a larger audience.
Mhm.
And this Australian man stands up and yells, "Bullshit!" And no one in medical meetings, let alone ophthalmology meetings, yells bullshit. And he followed that up with, "Carl, you are the pus and the pimple of the arsehole of everything that's wrong with this world." I said, wow, that's a pretty good turn of phrase. Who is that guy? And he said, I don't want to, he said, you know, you wouldn't have that surgery. You wouldn't let your mother have that surgery. I don't want to deal with people like you.
Right.
And he then went back to Australia and started raising money to build the first inexpensive intraocular lens factory,
Right.
which is now the Fred Hollows Intraocular Lens Factory in Kathmandu.
Right.
And it instantly brought the price on the world market from $240 for the least expensive lens implant down to $4. $4.
Wow.
And now there are several manufacturing facilities in India that are manufacturing them even at $3 and $2 a lens.
Wow.
And it's really changed the whole economics and the quality of vision that we can restore to people in the developing world.
So
And
now-
I'd actually like to just backtrack for 1 second about
Sure.
Sandak Rui, because he grew up in a little hill village,
Mhm.
4 days walk from the nearest road,
Mhm.
no electricity, no running water, no school. And I've been traveling a lot in the developing world. I just got back from Ethiopia 2 days ago, and I sometimes wonder what would have happened to me had I been born in one of these little tiny villages.
Right.
And Sandak watched 2 of his siblings die, one of tuberculosis,
Mhm.
and his father walked him at the age of 9
Mhm.
to go to school for the first time. When he finished high school, he scored well enough on exams to have a scholarship to the best medical school in India.
Mhm.
And when he graduated from medical school in India, he scored #1 in the nation of India on the medical exams.
Wow.
And then trained at the best places
In the world.
in India first.
Mhm.
Then he retrained as a microsurgeon in the Netherlands, then in Australia.
Right.
And he had returned to Nepal, and I was lucky enough to be sent by my Australian mentors to work with him.
Mhm.
And when I came to begin to work with him, I was really finding that I had nothing really to teach him. It was all him teaching me. And but I was kind of the enthusiastic fat boy who plays because I bring the ball. And we've been a pretty good team now for about 18 years.
I think you underestimate yourself. Now, so you created the the Himalayan Cataract Project, which was the first charitable organization now to come in and do these surgeries, and then from there you evolved now I think to cureblindness.org, right? As the
That's
parent
our website, cureblindness.org. Well, we called it the Himalayan Cataract Project because when I first went to work with Dr. Ruid in Nepal, there was a backlog of 200,000 cataracts.
200,000.
60,000 new people going blind a year.
Mm.
And Nepali surgeons were only doing 15,000 cataracts a year.
Wow.
There was no one doing modern cataract surgery in Bhutan, no one in Tibet, no one in the Himalayan band of northern India or Pakistan. So we thought this was going to be a lifetime just to get our handle on cataracts.
Right.
Now, last year, Nepalese surgeons did over 275,000 cataract surgeries.
Wow, and this is through the training that you guys provided.
So the train, well, again, I use the word we grandly, but Dr. Ruid has really been the spearhead. But we started taking some of our best young eye doctors and giving them really good training in cataract surgery.
Mhm.
But concomitantly, Dr. Ruid set up a program for 3 years after high school to train ophthalmic technicians, 1 year after nursing school to train ophthalmic nurses, 6 months after 8th grade to train ophthalmic assistants. And a system where no one does anything that someone with lesser skills can do.
Right.
Then we took some of our best
I don't want to go
cat-
over that too fast
Yeah.
because that, I think, it was a guiding principle that helped to leverage, the project, right? That, and you said that no one does anything that somebody with lesser skills can do. So everything that is not a specialty, unique thing that somebody has to have special ability for gets delegated to somebody who can handle it, so that way more volume of people can be processed.
Absolutely. We don't have trained nurses putting in eye drops. We
Right.
don't have trained technicians moving a patient from one place to another. And then we started taking our best young cataract surgeons and sending them either to America or Australia or Canada for subspecialty training. And then once we had the full component of subspecialties, we started a full residency program with full Western, American standards.
So at this point, is there a calculation to say that as a result of the efforts with Dr. Ruit and yourself and this whole project, how many people had blindness cured as a consequence?
Well, Dr. Ruit alone has done more than 100,000
by himself
cataract surgeries.
Oh my God!
When we have several other Nepali doctors who we've trained and work with us who are reaching that milestone. And then if you look at the number of people we've trained then around Asia and now around the world, it really does stretch into the millions now.
That's amazing. And now you're in Africa. As a matter of fact, I remember I introduced you to a chiropractor friend of mine over there, Dr. Marcus Manns.
Ghana.
From Ghana.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Great guy. I'm so glad you guys got together. And you just got back from Ethiopia, so the project is growing and blossoming there also.
It's really blossoming. I'm focusing most of my energy. Unfortunately, in Nepal, they're so good, they don't really need me. I've trained 6 corneal specialists in Nepal, and I'll now go over and I'll, show the latest, greatest technique that we're doing in America that currently takes me an hour and a half.
Right.
And I'll come back 6 months later, they'll have done 200 of them and are now doing them in 45 minutes.
Wow.
So I've been focusing much more on Africa, and Dr. Ruit, meanwhile, has been working in Indonesia, North Korea, and in Burma.
Wow.
And as we speak right now, Dr. Ruit is in Burma teaching cataract surgery.
Amazing. So all this culminates into a book that was written by David Oliver Relland, who wrote 3 Cups of Tea, which was obviously a huge book. Everywhere I went, I saw that book. And there's some drama, surrounding that maybe we'll talk briefly about. But the book is called Second Sons, and I'll put it here and maybe a little punch up on it. But when I read this book, and I had to try to do it impersonally, saying, okay, pretend I don't know Jeff, and I'm reading this book, and how is it grabbing me? How is it engaging me? And here is the overall effect, and this is, I guess, one of the major points I want to make during the course of this interview to help serve you who's watching the video. I was taken on this amazing real-life journey. It wasn't, it's not a fantasy, it's not fiction, it's nonfiction, but this book is so brilliantly written, so colorfully written, and so inspired. There's so much inspiration in the book that it started to get me to restore my faith in humanity, started to get me to contemplate my own life, my own contributions. What legacy am I going to leave in my life? When I look at the actions of the people, where they came from in this book, how they had a vision in the world and then went out after it, how they're able to solve problems. I mean, there's so many dimensions and aspects of the book. And the story itself is extremely engaging, but when you look at the metaphors of the actions of you, Dr. Ruit, the people in the book, it's amazing. But ultimately, what I have to imagine is an amazing experience, and this is what Relland did such a brilliant job covering here. And I get goosebumps, so I really want you to read this. And he really spent, I can't imagine the painstaking effort when he observed the lines of people in Nepal who were blind being let in, who walked for days to get there, and that they're led into the room, into the facility, and they talk about how this facility is set up. It's just like, wow, in the middle of nowhere, you set up this facility, bare bones. They walk in blind, and their life is almost over, and literally they leave with their eyesight. And that's with the brilliant title of the book, Second Sons, that they get to see the sun again in their life. So what is the experience like, when you're working with people who come in blind and suddenly, moments later, they can see?
It's still something that I never cease to have a thrill from. And particularly in remote areas. We were just in a remote area in northern Ethiopia. We did 600 surgeries last week.
Wow.
And the patients, they get their patch off, and there's this moment of hesitation and wonder, and then this unbelievable smile and joy and laughter and screaming. And 90% of the patients, if their only disease is a cataract.
Right.
A lot of people have also trachoma or glaucoma, particularly in Africa. But their only disease is a cataract. 90% will see well enough to pass the American driver's test
Wow.
the day after surgery.
Wow.
So they go from being unable to see how many fingers I hold up
Right.
at this distance, Patrick.
Right.
It's just the biggest thrill I have in medicine.
I can't even imagine what that must the environment. Relin does a brilliant job describing it in the book, though. He takes you in, he describes the whole thing. He's got the backstory on the people, and so it's better than any fiction novel I've ever read that takes you into this world, and then you know that it's real. So you might be saying, okay, well, it's great to hear this story, but what does this mean to me? I think the takeaway in many respects is that we all underestimate what our contribution can really be in this world, and how our own special gifts. Because you might say, "Well, I'm not a surgeon. I can't do eye surgery. So, what's the relevancy?" The relevancy is that you do have gifts and talents that you've trained for in your life, and that there are people in the world who can benefit from it in extraordinary ways, and that you can leverage those talents to touch people and see lives change as a consequence, and see the ripple effect of that. And I believe sometimes, with the way we see the world, we get very, how can I put it, defensive in our orientation. We get very insular in that we want to survive. We want to make it through. It's such a bad place out there. The reality is that I believe we can shine brighter, and there's more that we can do. And for me, personally, reading the book, experiencing the stories, seeing what these men did and how they changed the world, it completely reframed what I feel I can do in the world and how wide that impact can be. So my recommendation is, because we could sit here and talk for hours literally about the stories, but my recommendation is that you get the book. Again, it's called Second Sons, and you read it. Secondly, I would recommend let your patients read it. Let them start to recognize, the good in humanity, and the deliberate, cause and effect relationship between an intention that a human being has and the outcomes that they can create in people's lives. And I'd love to hear from you, as a matter of fact, as far as once you watch this video, you read this book, what did it stimulate in you? What action might you take? But if you want something to break you out of your here and now and expand the range of your vision, I think this book is it. So, Jeff, is there any final words you have for people?
No, I just that everybody is impacting other lives all the time.
Right.
And particularly, you take one person who can't walk, who can't work, is having difficulty in their daily life. Every person you touch is just as important.
Right.
And sometimes I need to really pull myself in. I just came from the University of Utah, where I was seeing patients today, and remind myself that my patient with a dry eye, who I just saw at the University of Utah, they still drove 45 minutes to see me, waited for an hour for their appointment, and their dry eye is the most important eye problem in their life.
Right.
Just like someone who's blind or who's had a terrible trauma in Ethiopia.
Right.
And it's also, when I work, I just came back from Ethiopia, the patients just sit and patiently wait. And there's an unbelievable amount of work to do, but we can get through it if we just focus and realize that every person we're interacting with at that time is the most important person in the world.
Right.
Take our time, give them the best care we can, then move on to the next person and do the same thing.
And isn't that the vitalistic side that we always talk about in chiropractic, right? Is that is the human element, and seeing the importance of what we call present time consciousness. That person right now is what you're focused on. They're the most important person in the world, and that's who you're giving your loving service to. So, Jeff, all I can say is thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Patrick. It's been a real pleasure.
And thanks for being
me.
such an awesome, an awesome inspiration, in what you're doing, in the world, and how you're setting an example, I think, for the rest of us.
I just try to do the best I can, and the book is. I really miss David Relin. Unfortunately, he passed away just before Random House published Second Sons.
Yeah.
And has not been able to share it, but he spent 2 years traveling with myself and Dr. Ruit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a funny book as well. It's kind of the story of this kind of hyperactive, very lucky American and an introverted incredibly brilliant man
Yeah.
who was born in a very remote area of Nepal.
Yeah, he brings characters to life. You know, the real
Yeah,
characters,
for
you,
sure.
and to life that in a very entertaining way. So, again, I would get the book. I would recommend it to your patients. Let them get inspired. I want you to be inspired, and I appreciate you spending time with us here today. And just when you come away from this video, don't look at the news for a little while. Don't pick up a newspaper for a little while. Just think about the good that can be done in the world and the fact that there are people out here that are trying to make it a better place. Thanks for watching.